Hi all, it's Emily Rand. We're back with another episode of LPL Corner. I'm super happy to have another returning favorite in Dagda from the LPL English broadcast. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me again. And we'll cross our fingers that the Chinese internet does not boom you again like it did last episode.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out as well as we were hoping, but yeah, happy to be back. Happy to be on
It's fine. Chat's used to it. We all watch LPL, so this is the first year. Actually, I will say this is the first ever year that LPL has had the least amount of disturbances, which is very funny when you think about the fact that they had to be online for a while.
Yeah, we got a really good crew behind the scenes that are trying to fix everything, so it's kind of like everyone there with fire extinguishers ready for whatever goes wrong, but yeah, they're trying their best, so hopefully we can get it fully fixed eventually, but yeah, it's good that it's starting to get on.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly the smoothest I've ever seen, and I know a lot of it is like infrastructure stuff that's out of your control, so we're here to talk about, kind of a Western favorite since the beginning of the LPL. I think people have really loved this team all the way back when it was them and WE, and especially since they won the World Championship in 2018. We're here to talk about Invictus Gaming and how they keep getting away with it, which is what I always say. Like, it's like the meme where they're like, they can't keep getting away with it, and then IG's like, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to start with, I'm going to talk a little bit about their spring, but I actually want to start with their first few weeks because I had Hysterics on as my first guest of the split, actually. And we were both just like, IG look terrible. Like, if they keep playing like this, like, they will not even make playoffs. We were really, really harsh on them. We were going in, we're like, Ning looks really discoordinated with the team. We have no idea what's going on with them. The Shy is like, usually he ints, but then he succeeds. And right now he's just inting. Like, what is going on? So I first have to ask you, like, what were your initial impressions of IG in those like first 2 weeks or so?
Oh, I was the exact same as yourself in Hysterics. I was like, this team looks really bad. The Shy is just inting continuously and doesn't know what a ward looks like, so I don't know what the hell's going to happen. But the funny thing is, like, this is kind of the story we have with IG all the time, right? Even back in spring when they looked really, really good, it was just like, no, this team looks terrible, and then they end up top of the table, and you're like, wait, what happened? And now we're having the same conversation again in summer, where it's like, this team still doesn't look like they have it together. They still have these weird game ones that just look like a solo queue game, and then you come in, and it's just like, right, actually, they're still pushing top of the table. So this is a team that basically thrives off of this weird chaos that they create, and then they somehow end up top of the table, and everyone goes, wait, how did that happen?
Yeah, I think, so the one thing I'll say that I feel hasn't changed about their style, technically, like, you could argue as far back as like 2011, but I'll focus on like the 2018 through now, like, iterations, like the world's kind of iteration to the current iteration that we have with Puff in the bot lane. I think that this team by nature, one of the things that happens, and I know like they've multiple current and former IG members and Jackie Love have addressed the fact that they can beat anyone and they can lose to anyone. And I think one of the reasons is that like a really strong dependence on like the mechanical skill of their laners. So if their laners aren't either given pushing laning matchups or they're just not performing as well as you would expect them to. Like, for example, we talked about the Shy. Like, he does have a tendency to overextend anyway, but overextending so much and getting like level 3 ganked constantly was a major issue for them. And like, we still even saw some of that in I think game 3 of the V5 series. But the nature of Invictus Gaming's playstyle to me is that because they constantly pick these fights and they always think they can win them regardless of gold, it means that they dig themselves into a deeper hole. So I do think that part of the dichotomy of IG is like they either look really, really good, right? Like they're getting the 20-minute Baron and they're closing out the game in the next 3 minutes, 4 minutes, right? And it's over. Like that's it. Or they keep fighting and they keep fighting into more and more and more of a deficit, so it just snowballs and it looks really bad. What do you, like,
Yeah,
how would you describe IG's playstyle?
I agree 100%. I think very focused on the lane mechanics, as you said, like between the shy and rookie and look good. I think the really interesting part is when, as you said, when they fall behind, they go for these Hail Mary plays consistently. But the funny thing is, like, sometimes it works out.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at I think it was RNG game one, where they fell super far behind, and then they went for this, like, two-man invade, just as, like, the rest of the guys had died. And they're just like, oh, okay, they picked off a few members, and it kind of nearly turned around. And then it was like, okay, now they can build off of this. So I think part of it is IG have realized, look, if we are going into these games and we end up falling behind early, there's a high chance that we're just going to be slowly choked out and we end up losing the game anyway. But every so often they'll go for these plays that don't make sense. But the thing is, because they don't, the enemy team isn't expecting it. So oftentimes the enemy team is caught out. And I know it sounds really silly, but it actually does end up working sometimes because they're just like, wait, why the hell are they here? And then suddenly they've got a kill and they get back into the game. Because like they have a crazy amount of games where they just end up pulling it back from behind. So I think it is really interesting, as you said, relying on these skirmishes, just moments where they can outplay their opponents and just perform better so then they can actually stay toe-to-toe with them. So yeah, they're just nuts.
Yeah, I remember talking, like, to your point, I remember talking to multiple players from at Worlds on Damwon and Team Liquid who were in their group. And they said they were like, why are they here? Like, we were not expecting them to do this, which is why I think this is going to get a little off topic, but like, that's why I think when you see like a IG versus FPX like semifinal, it looks so wildly different than any other, like any LPL semifinal or any LPL quarterfinal at Worlds looks so radically different than any other League of Legends at the World Championship, because the teams know each other really well and they already go in with that mentality. And IG is like the epitome of that for me. So there are two things I really want to touch upon when I'm looking at the success of this team specifically in the split, and it's Ning and Baolan. I'm going to touch on Ning first because I want to know what you thought of Loyan previously with the team.
I felt like Leon's style didn't really fit IG to a certain extent. I don't think he was able to really shine in that squad. I mean, you see it when he moves over towards Vici and he's able to play a little bit more towards his own style, which is a little bit more of an invade heavy, and then will sometimes play towards mid lane. But I think definitely on IG, he just didn't really get a chance to do what he wanted to. And every so often we'd see an Italy game where he's like, okay, cool, I can actually have a little bit of an impact. But most of the time, because, you know, the Shy and Rookie are doing their own thing and they're not going to play towards a jungler, like, you kind of just get lost in the mix. So I think definitely moving over towards Ning, who's much more lane orientated, makes it a lot better for IG because he's happy to go and sit in the bush for a couple of minutes while he sees if the Shy is going to be okay. But it's stuff like that that I think works a lot better for IG, where they obviously have the Shy, they have Rookie, just focus on these two guys and we can make our playstyle work through that.
Yeah, so I agree, actually 100%. But I think the interesting thing about that is that when I went back and I looked at Ning's pathing over this entire split, he's actually spent like fewer moments in lane than you'd expect. And additionally, IG have currently, as of today, they have the lowest first blood rate of any team in the LPL at 38%, which I thought was really funny, which doesn't necessarily mean that Ning isn't playing to his lanes, because I still think he is. It's just slightly tweaked, and it's tweaked because of the jungle meta, I think, right now, which is, I think, does still favor... if you have an LPL jungler like Ning, they can gank whenever they want regardless, but it does still favor farming junglers who also want to be carries in like mid to late game skirmishes. Like, I think we were talking about this off camera, but WE's Peishong can play a variety of different styles, but I think he looks really comfortable playing that style. I thought that was an interesting fact about Ning though, because I too agree. Like, I think IG, this current iteration of IG, all the way back to like 2018 IG, when you were like, this is the red side team and they're just drafting strong lanes and that's literally their strategy. I think that suits IG a lot more. I think they at the very least want a jungler who's going to be constantly communicating in lanes and being around lanes, regardless of whether he's actually like making the full motion to like pull off early ganks.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing is as well when I look at Ning, like I know the first blood percentage for IG is very low, but I mean we're also the shy as he said was getting level 3 ganked, so by default that first blood rate gets dropped real fast. But I still think Ning has looked pretty good, and obviously he's not kind of following in what a lot of other junglers have done, or even what a lot of other teams are doing, which is obviously this like Graves combo with Ashe and stuff like that, where you can focus fully on these carries. He's going more towards like the Lee Sins, the Volley Bears, and this kind of stuff. So I think it makes sense that he's playing a little bit more towards the lanes. And I think that doubles down a little bit when they have Baolan in as well. Like, sorry, towards at least, when I say lanes, towards their top side of the map. The only time that I really saw them playing more bot-centric was against the V5 game, where they're like, okay, cool, but clearly this team is going to just try and snowball bot lane. Let's just try and help out Puff and Baolan in that direction. And I think that worked out super well. So it was nice to see that change. But other than that, yeah, you know he's going to be up towards Rookie. He's going to be up towards the Shy. And that's what, like, it is interesting to see how much of an impact he can have in those games where, like, the Shy hasn't given across first blood and stuff, because he has, like, I think it's like 75% or something along those lines, first blood percentage in games where they get those first bloods. But obviously, as you said, it's super low. So it's nice when we can have him getting involved and getting into those lanes early. And then obviously that helps out the Shy because he gets this nice snowball, and he's like he's one of the most impressive top laners in the world. I mean, you always hear people talking about like playing against the Shy is a different beast altogether. And then obviously looking at Rookie as well, if you can get this guy ahead, well, he has these incredible performances as well. And just like in games where you don't even think a champion pull out as much damage as he does, he just manages. So like even with an Azir and laning phase, every single time I watch it, he's just got this massive advantage. And I'm just like, that's just not fair. That's just not the way that matchup is supposed to go.
Yeah, I think I want to touch upon two things you said actually, because they're in my notes to bring up. I do want to talk about Baolan a little bit later. The first thing I want to address though is that one of the most infuriating things that happened in spring with IG was when they went up against E-Star, and they very obviously did not scout E-Star, because E-Star did the same exact thing bot lane. And I'm not saying, I actually think V5 are smarter than E-Star. Like, I think they have more options across the board in terms of how they want to play out the early game, despite the fact that they are a very bot-centric team. But E-Star was very rigid about, like, we gank bot at this time, we have this very specific play, and then we swap for Herald priority at, like, exactly 8 minutes, like, all, like clockwork, right? And IG were completely surprised by that bot lane play. And I remember watching it and being like, all you have to do is watch one E-Star game and you know this is coming. And so the V5 match was like set up for that to happen again, right? We're like, okay, V5 do have some really specific tendencies. We know that. And lo and behold, there's Ning at his Krug camp right on time. And Wei comes down and he actually gets first blood. And I was just like, I know you guys pointed out on cast, but I was just like, oh, they learned. Like, this is great. I'm so happy. And I actually also think part of that is Baolan. So he is back mid, like what, around week, let me double check. It was in the DMO series, was the one where they experimented by starting all 3 different supports.
All 3, yeah.
And then, and since it has been kind of an experimental phase, I do think I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Southwind was, I believe, banned for the LNG series for something he said, on stream, and he was fined for it, and he was not allowed to play in that series. So I do want to bring that up because obviously they could only start Reheal or Baolan in that game. But ever since the E-Star series, Baolan has been starting. And he is, I feel like I don't want to say controversial figure on IG, but he's definitely been there, he's been cited as their weakest link by me. I'll fully call myself out. Like I have been very critical of Baolan in the past, especially some of his decision making, and especially on like these really big stages, like at Worlds. But he is someone like I did want to bring up the fact that Wang Shikong, if I remember correctly, specifically requested that Baolan stay with this team like twice when he tried to leave. Like he was like, no, like we want you here. We very specifically want you here. And it was both Baolan and Jakulov before the whole mess with Jakulov happened. But it's been really interesting, like watching him come back, watching him succeed, and his synergy with Ning has been really good. Yeah. Like really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's the most surprising part is just how well they look together. And I think I like to go back. I 100% agree. He's looked super shaky in some games. Like I remember watching that the RNG game and a set, and just level 1, he's just like, look, I'm gonna 1v2 here, and it's gonna go great. And I was like, this is not the play. And he ended up giving over first blood. Like it's little things like that where I'm like, okay, come on. And then there's other games where I'm like, what I love is it's kind of a doubling down on what we already talked about with Ning, is like trying to play through top side of the map. And oftentimes we will just see Baolan like stick Ezreal or puff on Ezreal. We'll go roam towards mid lane. We just set up these plays over and over, and it's just, it works so well with the style of the team because, I mean, obviously for a lot of this, Puff is just kind of like, okay, cool, I'm just going to be here and I'm going to deal my damage and it's going to be fine. But he's not, it's like, it's all about the shy, it's all about Rookie. So having Baolan at least being able to play through this mid lane as well just adds another level of complexity to trying to deal with Rookie's aggression as well. And as you said, it's looked great playing alongside Ning, where they're just able to control so much of the map just through them moving around. And it's not even mid lane. I mean, oftentimes you'll see it like 6 minutes into the game, there's just a Baolan in the top lane and they're going for a dive. So it's just, it looks really, really clean. And I do love how it just gives another level to the, okay, let's get Rookie, let's get the shy rolling. Apart from obviously the V5 game that we talked about.
And I didn't have time to like go back and review like 2018, for example, right? But I feel like we didn't see this with them before. Like I feel like this is a relatively new development that even if they were communicating well, because Baolan, there was actually a really interesting video that was done. Like someone basically analyzed his playstyle, and then it was translated by an IG fan on Twitter, and for the YouTube video, I'll link it in comments. But basically they brought up that looking at Baolan's pro view, he tends to be really, really lane focused, which causes him to like make a few mistakes, because he's not looking at the rest of the map. But he said that he has like a really weird decision making around like trying to prove himself useful or have the team like validate his decisions, which I thought was a really interesting remark. And if that's the case, I feel like if he does have someone like Ning validating those decisions or bringing him in, being like, okay, like instead of not working together as we have in the past, like let's actually try to work together for vision. Let's try to make these plays like in unison. I think that would really, really help someone like Baolan, who and again, like I think this is also it's a problem we see sometimes with supports or anyone who is in an engage heavy position where their mistakes are a lot more visually obvious. So like when I see Baolan mess up, right, like it's really easy to see because it's visually easy to see. It's visually easy for anyone to see. And Baolan does like try to play a lot of engage for IG at times. So having that validation from Ning is actually really interesting. And I like that it's working, and I like that it's kind of taking what IG already has, which is like mechanically strong laners. Depending on how you feel about Puff. I don't know how you feel about Puff. I don't think he's there quite yet, but like for me personally. But I think that having that validation from Ning and having that coordination with Ning is like a new facet of what IG already tend to be successful at, and it can only help them.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely doubling down on that engage aspect of it. I think that's something that IG definitely need, is someone who be this big engage tool, because I mean, yes, when Ning was on Volibear or something like that, like, okay, cool, this looks great. And Ning's Lee Sin has been pretty clean, where he's been able to find some of these really nice insect plays to get fights started for them or make it happen. But I think having someone who's kind of that dedicated role will work a lot better for them, because obviously the Shies wants to go and play Jace, he wants to go and play this carry-oriented top laner, or the Kennen that he's looked really good on at the
Yeah.
moment. And oftentimes you actually end up seeing Rookie, if he's on something like an Azir, he kind of ends up as this engaged tool to a certain extent. So I think having Baolan as this definitive, okay, cool, this is the guy who's going to get our fight started. And he's been doing a really good job of it. I think his engages have super clean. It's just, as he said, those early decision makings can be a little bit wonky. But like once he gets out of lane and he does start interacting with Ning, it feels like at least Ning kind of puts the bearings on him a little bit, where it's just like, okay, cool, this is where we're going, this is how we want to start things off. And then from that, things just look a lot smoother. The interesting thing is, though, for me, just like looking at some of the games, how much, despite this kind of two-man roaming squad and how often they end up playing towards that top half, because they end up playing towards that top half of the map, how much they seem to just leave some of the bigger objectives like the dragons and stuff to the wayside. Like there's sometimes where they kind of get a little bit bloodthirsty and it's just like, right, we're going to double down. Ning and Baolan are just going to run for kills. We're going to see if we can get them. Where oftentimes you're like, hang on, lads, if you just stop, turn towards dragon, you can set yourself up with this nice advantage. But there's still that little bit of bloodthirstiness in them where I'm like, come on, just rein it in a little bit, guys.
There's it's obviously like an individual thing, but like I'm just thinking of in the V5 series, I think it was in game 1. Let me check my like pathing thing really quickly. Yeah, it was in the first game where Ning, like he predicts the bot lane gank, right? And they're like all set, and then they have a fight like immediately post dragon. And Ning ends up giving the third kill over to Mole for a triple kill just so he could go in and kill Weiwei.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is like quintessential IG, right? Like you got to take someone out with you even if you could have escaped.
Yeah, I feel like IG is what everyone considers the LPL. Like if I was going to make a team that was what was everyone's thoughts on the LPL, it'd just be IG. It's like super strong mechanics. They just want to kill everyone and everything, and objectives don't really matter. It's just about we've got this massive gold lead that you can't deal with. But yeah, I mean, they just love killing people. It's just like, hey, any opportunity you can get, it's going to work out. Yeah, I think it can lead to some strange decisions and some odd situations where you're like, okay, well, IG can get this much larger gold lead. I mean, either if it's about going for a tower or going towards, okay, we're going to set up some dragons for ourselves because our composition is going to look great if we can get this soul, and then you just end up in this situation where they're like, no, we're just going to forgo that. There's someone in the jungle that we could probably pick off and we're just going to go for it. So I think there's still some moments where I'm like, okay, cool, IG. And I think this is why we see IG looking so shaky, right? Because if they get the pick, okay, well, then they can turn towards what the objectives that they actually want. Or at least then, there's nothing on the map to distract them. But the problem is that because they end up having this situation. Yeah. So it means that then, well, what happens? They end up not getting the pick. They're still chasing this down. The enemy team either respawns or is in a position to try and deal with them. And then the whole play is just shut down. So I think it's kind of like that's what adds to the shakiness of this squad, is just like some of that decision making isn't quite there. But it does go back to, well, why the conversation we were having, which is sometimes Invictus Gaming are just in these weird spots, and that's what catches teams off, which allows them to get these massive. So it's kind of a bit of a both that kind of works out for them. So I never really know how to go with it.
What do you think of their dragons and Baron setups? Because I feel, let's just say, I don't know how to feel about them. I was really critical of their dragon percentage, I think like earlier in spring, I believe. Yeah. But I feel like they've been better lately about trying to get priority. Like they've been a lot better, I would say, I think generally across the split, about at least trying to get like an early look at what's going on with dragon. But then since they tend to focus more topside, that doesn't always happen, or they just don't know how to balance priority. So like what do you just generally think of their, I'm just curious, like what do you think of their Dragon and Baron setups?
I don't think it's particularly great, especially Dragon. I'm kind of like stuck there a lot of the time. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, you've got a minute 30 until Dragon. Nobody's really backing. Then we get to 50 seconds. No one was really trying to reset or anything like that. So I think when it comes towards objectives, are a lot more opportunistic. Whereas just kind of like, okay, cool. We've got this amount of time, we've spotted someone somewhere that they shouldn't be, or we've just got the right kind of feeling at the moment. We're go towards the Baron or the Dragon. Their Baron calls are a lot cleaner, I would say, than their, well, sometimes than their Dragon or even the Rift Herald plays. Where there's sometimes I'm just it seems to be these early objectives where I look and go, okay, I mean, you can set up, you've got strong push in bot lane, you can get deep vision, you can go and have control of this area and then look for the play. But oftentimes it just kind of seems to be much more of a, hey, Baolan's roam towards mid, we've got to kill onto the mid laner, right, we can turn towards Dragon, or maybe they'll get a pick on towards the top laner as well and they'll go towards Rift Herald. But there never really seems to be, like say if I look at a team like V5 who sets up very well for them, they seem to be much more situated on, okay, cool, let's play the standard style of we will back at a minute 30, this will give us time to go, get our wards, come back out on the map, set them all up, and then we're good to go. Whereas IG just seems to be much more of a, hey, look, we've made a pick, we've made a play happen, and then Dragon's the after.
So now it's time to preview the bloodiest team versus the second bloodiest team by 0.0 combined kills. They're 0.01 IG is behind Top Esports in combined kills per minute. Yeah. They face off. These are currently, they're not actually 1 and 2 because JDG has played one fewer game, but they may be, I don't know, JDG will probably still be up there because they're playing BLG. Yeah. But these are two of, no offense BLG, but these are two of the top teams in LPL. They face each other on the last game of the week. What's going to happen?
I'm so excited. I don't know. I like personally, I'm on the Top Esports side because actually myself and Lyric had this conversation about what we value in teams. And the reason we had this whole discussion start was when we saw LGD initially at the start of Split. We were like, I tend to value consistency more because I'm like, look, if I know that this team is going to consistently be able to pick up wins against some of the lower teams and do well against some of the top teams, I think they're going to do really well in the Split. Whereas Lyric is all about the ceiling. Like he wants to know how high can this team go. And I think when I look at Invictus Gaming,
I wonder if he loved Mole so much, even when he was like popping between every single position.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's Lyric has got an infatuation with the entirety of V5. I mean, to be fair to him though, I mean, there's actually a clip of him on this show back in spring going V5 are going to playoffs in summer. So I mean, look, it's worked out for him, you know. But I think the biggest thing is kind of like when I look at Top Esports, although obviously they're just as aggressive, they're just as bloody, there's a lot more consistency there for me. So I think that's what I value out of Top Esports a lot more. Is just that I know kind of what I know what I'm getting. Although with IG, you kind of know what you're getting. It's just you're waiting to see what's going to happen, I suppose. But yeah, with Invictus Gaming, the playstyle is just a little bit all over the place. So I never really know. Well, like let's look at the laners. I mean, it's the Shy versus 369. I don't think the Shy is going to get massively ahead there. I really like the 369 at the moment, and for me, he's the best top laner of the LPL right now.
I agree.
Knight versus Rookie. I mean, that is the battle for best mid laner in the LPL. And although Knight in an interview said back the last time they faced up in spring was just like, hey, yeah, I just wanted to like hop out of the lane. It was like Lysandra, Syndra's, I'm just not going to interact with this lane at all. I still want to see what they can do. But again, I don't think it's going to be, hey, Rookie's got this massive lead and he's just able to run away with the game again. So I think when I look at that, I think looking at Top Esports, they just control IG a lot better. And then they're perfectly happy going into the chaos because they can match them pound for pound when it comes to skill, when it comes to mechanics and everything else. So I still think Top Esports have an edge. But that being said, you just never know with this gaming. Sometimes they just manage to pull out these crazy wins out of nowhere against teams that you think should have better control of.
Yeah, I think to your point about objectives, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up is I think Top have a lot better objective setups than IG do. But here's the thing. I'll pull out, because I also think top are gonna win, but I'll pull out like the IG win condition because I do think it can happen, and I think the way it happens is that I talked about how Ning has not been like he doesn't pull off as many like level 2, level 3 ganks as you might expect from his like playstyle historically. I think if he is super aggressive early, there's a chance for IG because they do know how to snowball something like that really, really well. I think the main issue is that, to your point that you brought up, a lot of the times one of the ways that IG tends to win some of these fights is that they just have, like, regardless of whether the Shy is like doing really poorly in lane, right? Like he can come in and still have like an incredible team fight where his positioning, his timing, his entry, his team fight targeting, and then his just like raw mechanical skill is still insanely good across the board.
I mean, we saw that in our play, right? He's 0-3
Yeah.
in lane and suddenly just murders everyone. So yeah, I know what you mean.
But I think top esports are not going to be, like, to your point, I don't think that I think they match up mechanically in every single way, actually, even if you're looking at, and like, I'm not going to dunk on Baolan too much because I actually think he's been performing well. But if you look at both of their like quote unquote like weak spots in terms of if you're looking at both teams mechanically, I think it would be Yanja and Baolan. So top esports even matches them there. And I think Jackie Love, regardless of what people think about him, in top esports few last series where they're just like, I don't know how he keeps getting away with just flashing in and dying, but then in the next team fight he flashes in and it works out. I do see Jackie Love as a stronger performer than Puff. So I also think that top esports have the edge there. So if it just devolves into like we're trading kills everywhere, like V5 IG game 3, which was just like, just watching that game is like a treat. Like if I have to convince anyone to watch the LPL, I feel like I'm showing them game 3 of Victory 5 IG.
Yeah, that game was nuts. It was so much fun.
It's just like everyone's dying all the time. It's great. It's so much fun. Like this is why you watch LPL. Like you don't watch it for any other reason like but this. I think if it does devolve into that though, I do think top esports can go toe to toe with IG. And arguably, I mean, V5 like they almost I feel like it wasn't like exactly an IG like super convincing stomp, you know? So
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you have anything else to add on the top esports IG front.
I 100% agree with your bot lane analysis, and I think the biggest thing for me is like, what do we say to Baolan? Because I'm always curious to see like, do we just see Baolan sitting in the bot lane, or like maybe even see, then mix it up a little bit and try and play through bottom side like we saw against V5, because we saw obviously that V5 were able to destroy top esports by playing through that bottom lane as well. So I'm curious if they do mix it up again. But even if they don't, I think having Baolan just go and roam, I think kind of just sets them off onto a really good pace already. So I think if he can have Baolan have these impacts through, it's a little bit harder, I feel like, through mid lane because Knight doesn't tend to overextend a huge amount, but there is always still the opportunity to go and play through that lane. And then the same in towards 369 and topside, like 3-man dive, go set up your play there and set up the Shy to just win out through a side lane is always an opportunity as well. So I'm curious to see if they actually unlock Baolan from the bottom lane, and then it becomes much more difficult for Karsa to try and just contain Ning because Ning has always got the backup that is Baolan. So I'd be curious to see how the game plan from IG coming in is, because I think that's as you kind of pointed out, is the coolest thing is that we've seen IG actually start to tailor all their games to who they're actually playing, and they're starting to sit down and do the research. So if they're looking at that, if we're looking at that V5 top esports game, I'd be like, okay, cool, we can play through bot lane, or maybe we can just try and unlock Baolan because we know that Puff will be fine just sitting there against Yanji and Jackie Love if you've just got him on something like an Ezreal.
And I do think that's another interesting difference to point out to piggyback off on what you just said. I don't think Yuyanja is nearly good unlocked as Baolan is, because
No.
you can say whatever you want about Baolan's like actual mechanics. And again, I'll call myself out here because I have. But he has the experience and the knowledge to play out of lane a lot better than Yuyanja does. And Yuyanja and Jackie Love have kind of been evolving as a bot lane that stays together, and they really want to contest everything super aggressively in lane all the time. And they go for the 2v2. They really like aggressively like to go for the 2v2, I think. And Yuyanja is like very rarely unlocked in the same way that we've seen Baolan start to roam and not even necessarily group up with Ning, sometimes group up with Ning, but sometimes just like ward for Ning. And so that Ning can come through and path however he wants, or they can track the enemy jungler. So I think that's another really important difference to point out between these two teams as well, is just the way they play around their respective bot lanes. I'm predicting top esports. I think it's probably actually still going to be a 2-1. I think IG will maybe take a game if they can, if they can get some sort of like really strong early advantage somewhere. I think it can be a 2-1, but I don't see IG edging them out in the series.
I'm really interested to see how the draft goes, because
Yeah.
one of the things that
That'll
like
be super
we always
important.
kind of joke about is whenever we see an IG like game 1 or game 2, one of them, there will always be this really weird draft, which is just like, hey, we got a Jace top lane, Rookie wants to play Orianna mid, and then you guys just kind of fill in whatever the hell you want in the middle of it. But they end up just with these strange compositions that nothing really synergizes. It's just kind of like, we're going to try and kill you in lane and then run away with the game from that. But obviously you're coming in against top esports, and this is such an important series for IG to pick up, especially if they're going to be pushing towards the upper part of the bracket, because you want to be in that first, second spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see how that draft changes. Like, do they take it very seriously, or do we still see them going for this weird draft straight off the bat? But yeah, I think it's going to be an absolutely amazing series. Like, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's gonna be really fun, especially since JDG play right before. So we're also gonna see where. I mean, I'm fully expecting them to beat BLG, but maybe they don't. Who knows? Anything can happen in LPL. IG have left on their schedule, so they have top. But then they only have 2 games left because they've played the majority of their games already. They have OMG and Vici. Where do IG land? Because they're pretty much in control of their own destiny here, I think, in terms of like, if they beat the teams they're supposed to beat in OMG and Vici, they're landing top 3, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so,
I imagine they are going to. Like, I think they should beat OMG and Vici. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. And even though Vici like have had a little bit of a resurgence, I don't think they're at the level where they could contend with IG. I think that's a different beast altogether. It's hard to, like, I'd be very surprised if they didn't hit top 3, especially, look, I mean, FPX is right down the list. WE are still there. LGD not looking so hot. V5 are just coming off the back of a couple of defeats now, where I'm like, okay, the momentum seems to be lifting from this team. Suning, obviously, just having picked up that win over V5 yesterday, there's discussion there. But I think with where IG are positioned right now, it'd be kind of surprising if they didn't pick up 2 more wins and then just sit in top 3. Like, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on JDG. They have more games to play. V5 have a tough, I will say V5 have a tough back half still, because they have WE and JDG coming up, which I think they should still beat WE, but JDG is going to be more of a problem. All right, well, we solved the mystery of IG, which is they can lose to anyone and they can beat anyone. I actually like, people think I hate IG. I actually like really love them so much. I just also hate them.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the relationship you have, right? Because this team can look so good when their game plan works. They look absolutely amazing. You're like, right, this is one of the top teams. But the thing is, when that goes south, that's when they just double down on, we are going to push hard, we are going to go for these fights, we're going to try and find these skirmishes, and even go for these wonky plays that everyone knows is a bad play. But the thing is, they catch teams out because the other team is like, this is a bad play. Clearly no one would go for this. And then the other team isn't prepared and they can actually get something back in the favor. So I think that's the thing, is that like nothing about this team is stock standard. Nothing about them is the way that you expect League of Legends to be played. And sometimes because of that, it looks absolutely amazing because teams aren't prepared for it or others aren't prepared for it. But sometimes when it goes horribly well, because they've doubled down on this is a bad play, and we've got caught out for it, but then they look just absolutely terrible and it just falls completely asunder. So I don't know. You gotta love them, but they're also the most frustrating thing in the world when they really do just keep going with mess and everything.
My favorite stat about them is I think they'd only have like 5. Someone did a Reddit thread, or someone put this in a Reddit thread, I think, where like they would only have 5 or so wins if it was only best of ones, because they always like they're wonky, throwaway draft, weird, like we forgot how to play the game. Game is usually their first one, so they would lose like a ton of their.
That's the most frustrating part.
Games.
You have to have the conversation about, hey, look, well, they don't look good in this first game. But the problem is that game 2 and 3 are so clean, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to be analyzing here? Like, do I just hold game 2 and 3 aside and just be like, look, game 1 happened, but that doesn't count. You just got to look at 2 and 3. But you can't, because, I mean, that's still part of IG, and I think that's why people are like, you can't keep getting away with this, but they do, because they still look amazing in game 2 and 3, and it's so annoying.
That's why I feel like V5 IG is the perfect microcosm for this team, because they have the game 1 where they're just like, we're drafting a scaling comp ? And then they lose that. They get the 20-minute Baron after like an insane Kennen ult from the Shy coming in that dragon fight in game 2. They immediately close out the game because they can do that. Like if they can get the 20-minute Baron, they can close out the game within the next 4 minutes. And then you have game 3, which is just, constant skirmishing, like the entire game. I feel bad for who was the play-by-play on that this past.
I think past
week. Everything goes out of my mind.
Yeah, it's Munchables. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel bad that he for him in that series is just constant.
Oh, he loved it. He loved every second.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today to uncover the mystery of IG. Hopefully the IG fans appreciated this, and or maybe they're mad that we were so critical. But I love IG, and I also hate them because they do keep getting away with it. But they're always fun to watch. So that is the end thing. I think we can always say that since you know what to expect from IG, but the nature of their play styles that you never know what to expect from IG, they're always interesting.
Yeah. And I'm hoping at this stage that they do make it to the world stage again, because it is always interesting to see how teams that aren't prepared for them go up against them. But obviously we'll have to wait and see how that one.
I think IG would be undefeated if all they did was ARAM people.
Yeah.
Like if it was just ARAM, IG would just destroy everyone.
Well, that's the thing. They pick half the champions that are only in ARAM anyway. So it's just like, okay.
If all of their game 1s were ARAMs. Again, thank you so much for waking up early and coming on to talk IG. I'll let you know when the YouTube VOD is out. And thank you to everyone who joined us live. If you're listening to the YouTube VOD later on, thank you so much. And for more LPL and League of Legends coverage, check out ESPN ESPORTS, either on our YouTube channel or at Twitch /ESPN ESPORTS. Thank you so much, guys.